Follow the size, just to let everybody know here at home, to be watching, it's being recorded. And just to notify to the audience that we have with us tonight that the mics are very sensitive, so please can you keep your phones switched off, please. Okay, first item of business tonight. I know no fire drills is not planned for tonight, but if the fire alarm does go off, please make your way through the nearest exit, please, and assemble outside of the front of the building. First item of business is apologies. I have two apologies, Councillor Fear, which have been substituted by Councillor Easton. Good evening. And Councillor Easton has sent her apologies also. Is there any other apologies? No. Thank you. Declarations of interest. See declarations of interest from members on items included on the agenda tonight. Do you have any declarations? That's an item. You. Brings on to item 3 of the agenda. Minutes of the previous meeting. Do we consider that for true and accurate record of events that night? Yes, sir. Can I have show of hands, please? Thank you. That is unanimous. That brings us on to the first substantial item of the agenda tonight. Application for major development, Baldwinsgate Farm, Newcastle Road, Baldwinsgate. For those members and those in the audience that this isn't to decide whether the principle of planning application is to be established. That's already been established. This is for the detail of reserved matters. Just to remind council that that's why we're here tonight to hear. So I'll open that to our officers who will introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the approval of reserved matters relating to internal access arrangements, layout, scale, appearance and landscaping in respect to the residential development of 200 dwellings at Baldwinsgate Farm. Location here is shown on the screen, it's actually edged in red, so this is the main road through Baldwinsgate, and currently farm, Baldwinsgate Farm. This is where the previous housing scheme is now house. It's just here. So this follows the granting this appeal of outline planning permission for up to 200 dwellings on this site. Details of the main access from the A53 were approved as part of the outline consent. So the outline consent was granted subject to a number of conditions, one of which required that any reserved matters applications for the site should accord with the approved parameters plan and principles set out in the design and access statement. So this is the approved parameters plan. You can see before you. So in the orange colour that was shown to be the built residential developments, and then obviously the green areas of open space and the blue area there. So yeah, this is the approved parameters plan, and your officers are happy that the layout that we received as part of this reserved matters application does meet that condition in that it complies with this parameters plan. So the plan that we have before us that we're considering tonight is this one. This is the detailed layout for the site. The majority of objections received from local residents relates to the impact of a housing scheme of this size upon the surrounding highway network, local amenities and the capacity of the sewerage system. These are all matters that were considered and accepted as not grounds for refusing the outline planning permission and therefore cannot be revisited now. So a mix of 2, 3, 4 and 5 bed dwellings are proposed, with a mix of detached, semi-detached and mews style terraces to provide a range, type and size of dwellings that's considered acceptable. The dwellings would all be 2-storey in height and would be constructed from brick and tile. The character of the development would vary across the site, with higher density development situated centrally here within the site. And given the variety of dwelling size, density and style currently in the village, it's considered that the layout proposed would respect local character. So just got some examples of the house types here for you. The detailing within the house types would be simple, unfussy with traditional architectural features such as pitched gabled roofs, a mix of render and brick, window sills and heads, soldier courses, and limited use of bay windows and chimneys. Corner dwellings would be dual aspects to provide active frontages on both sides and to avoid blank elevations. And you a couple more house types, so it's that one. So it's considered that the design of the dwellings and the materials palette proposed would provide a consistency throughout the site, but would also provide sufficient articulation of focal points to create variety and interest in the street scene. The layout and density of the proposed scheme and the proposed house types reflect local character, and it's considered that the proposal would be acceptable in terms of its design and impact on the form and character of the area. With regards to waste collection, the majority of the internal roads within the site are to be constructed to adoptable standards, and therefore will be serviced by a local authority waste refuge service. However, there are a number of plots located off turning heads of some of the junctions that wouldn't be accessed via an adoptable road. The applicant has provided suitably sized and positioned bin storage collection areas for these plots. So a total of 35 dwellings out of the 200 would use a bin collection point. So this plan shows in blue those bin collection points, and it also has the maximum distance that any of the properties serve from that would need to use that bin collection point would have to move their bin to get to that collection point. So the suitability of the main access point from the A53 was considered to be acceptable in the determination of the outline application as appeal. Therefore, this application looks only at the suitability of the internal road layout and the provision of parking. Initial comments from the Highway Authority resulted in the submission of additional amended information, and on this basis, the Highway Authority raised no objections to the development subject to conditions. So, as shown on the layout plan, there are a number of areas of open space within the site. It's a large swathe of open space that would run the whole length of the site between this narrower eastern portion and the wider western portion of the site. It would comprise attenuation basins here and here, to either end, with a central area containing the children's play area. A linear area of open space is proposed along the northwestern boundary of the site, along with allotments here, which are for local use. A further area of open space is proposed around the retained veteran oak tree, which is here to the west of the retained farm buildings. So it's considered that the large open spaces at the entrance to the site and in the centre would help to give the site an attractive open feel. The amount of open space proposed and the location and design of the play area is acceptable. Existing trees would be retained where possible, and further landscape enhancements is proposed in the form of enhanced green landscape buffers. The street tree planting is proposed where possible. New areas of meadow grassland alongside areas of native shrub planting would also be provided. In allowing the appeal, the inspector was satisfied that there would be no undue additional risk of flooding, subject to the conditions of the outline consent, which require the submission of a scheme for drainage for the disposal of foul and surface water flows, and require the development to be carried out in full accordance with the approved risk assessment. A separate condition discharge application has been submitted, providing details of a drainage scheme. These details must be approved before any development can commence. The provision of 25% affordable housing was secured through the Section 106 agreement, and this should comprise a 10-year split of 60% social rented units and 40% shared ownership units. The submitted layout demonstrates that these levels would be secured with the provision of 31 units of social rented and 19 of shared ownership. 30 of the units would be 2-bed and 20 would be 3-bed. Officers are satisfied with the proposed house types and consider that the units are sufficiently pepper-potted across the site.
Thank you, Rachel. Before I talk to councillors, we have a number of speakers on this item. We have 2 objectors and 1 supporter of the scheme. I'd like to at this point to invite the first speaker of the evening, Parish Councillor Mr. Guy Chapman. If you'd like to come up to the front, please. Evening, councillor. You have 5 minutes to make your case. At 4 minutes, you will be reminded that you've got a minute left. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. My name is Guy Chapman. I'm a parish councillor at Mayor and Aston Parish Council. We have campaigned for years for roundabouts where the A53 crosses the A51, the Swan with 2 next junctions at Blackbrook. It is an accident hotspot. Daily tailbacks on the A53 create grapplons down nearby lanes. Even though HS2 was installing traffic lights, not roundabouts, we welcomed the safety legacy from their mitigation works. But we strongly object to these inadequate developer alternatives. I wonder if you saw the BBC News article. It reported planning officers here saying objections cannot be revisited now. The BBC may not realise that the council had HS2's junction scheme under consideration back then, and at the appeal, not this one. As recently as July last year, the appeal inspector required the developer to model HS2's junctions to see if they'd cope. But 3 months later, HS2 was scrapped. So the developer's plans are now the default. The way they plan to cope with their extra cars is to ban existing traffic movements 2 miles away. This comprises a material change of planning, requiring, in our view, a revisit. They differ in 3 ways. Firstly, an unsafe ban. The A51 traffic from Nantwich will be banned from turning right at Blackbrook, diverted instead into Hungersheath Lane half a mile before, confusing drivers, confounding sat-navs, unlit with a narrow, weak bridge and a hazard exit onto the A53. And worst of all, sending traffic headlong into the rad run coming the other way. Unsafe cut-through. Unlike HS2, the developer will keep the notorious Walmerdine Lane open. Traffic will simply use it to bypass queues despite its slow entry angle, which caused a fatal accident in 2021, now marked with a roadside memorial. And thirdly, the unsafe speed limit. Unlike HS2, the developer will not reduce the speed limit from 30 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour, leaving it at 50. We say it's unacceptable to permanently disconnect a major regional trunk road intersection. How does that fit with the local plan? And can a housing developer really do all this without anyone being able to object? We say no. No to Bellway's ban. Our parish council has 2 requests in this committee. Firstly, defer a decision, visit the site and consult widely. And secondly, set a 50 homes limit as a condition of planning until approved, yes, approved roadworks are finished. This was the inspector's ruling at appeal. It is not in your pack tonight. It should be made enforceable. But finally, I'd like to speak on a more personal note. That fateful conclusion in 2021, it was April. I'll never forget it. I witnessed the immediate aftermath. My wife, also a parish councillor, and I, with another motorist, 1 minute, arrived at Warmadine Lane, discovering the devastating impact from the motorbike's collision with a lorry turning off the A51. Despite our very best efforts, the young rider died. Kneeling on the tarmac, soaked in engine oil, we resolved then and there to close this dangerous cut-through, reduce speed limits once and for all. Councillors, please, you must revisit the developer's unsafe junction plans tonight. Say no to Bellway's ban. Future lives made unknown. Thank you.
Second. Objector, please make their way forward, please. Mr. Neil Walker. Good evening. You have also 5 minutes to make your case. Thank you. Mr. Jim, when you're ready.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. As you're aware, I have consistently opposed this development, having addressed both the original planning committee and the subsequent appeal. While the appeal's outcome was disappointing, I must say it did not come as a surprise. In my view, this was largely due to what I believe was an inadequate defence by the council, one that lacked both depth and strategic foresight. Despite my efforts to seek clarity through a freedom of information request, many critical questions remained unanswered, reflecting a troubling lack of transparency from the council. I'm also aware of the financial arrangements surrounding the sale of this land. It is my understanding, had the landowner fully grasped how the planning process unfolded and the position taken by the council, they would have reconsidered their decision to sell, especially since the agreement was only signed last October. Our farmers, who have long been the custodians of our greenbelt and our rural landscape, are often our first line of defence against inappropriate development. If they were better supported, I believe we could prevent some of the pressures driving these kinds of projects. Unfortunately, we now find ourselves in a position, under current political pressure, the planning process could be further weakened. This is a growing concern that this committee may be reduced to a mere formality, with decisions predetermined despite local opposition or community interests. That said, I do want to acknowledge and express my appreciation for this committee's initial rejection of this application. However, I believe that a more robust approach during the planning process, a deeper level of scrutiny, and a stronger defence could have protected our community from this outcome. At times, it feels as though we are fighting an uphill battle with obstacles placed by the very bodies that should be defending local interests. Moving forward, I urge you to consider the future of our communities carefully. I am no longer a serving parish councillor. However, I remain deeply committed to safeguarding the well-being of our residents. The disruption caused by this development will undoubtedly be significant, and it is essential that we put measures in place to minimise its impact. To that end, I formally request that a condition is imposed requiring the developer, Bellway, to establish a liaison committee. This committee should include representatives from the developer, the parish council, and members of the local community. Its purpose will be to monitor site activity, address any disruption, and respond promptly to concerns raised by residents. Such a measure would open lines of communication and provide a forum to manage the inevitable challenges as this project proceeds. For example, residents have already expressed concerns about the imposing nature of a sign placed on the site by the developers. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak. I trust that you'll give these points your careful consideration as you deliberate on this important matter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. a supporter of the scheme, Debbie Farrington. Would you like to come forward? We'll talk about this in your end.
The committee will be aware that outline consent for up to 200 dwellings, associated car parking, public open space, attenuation basins, landscaping with access from the A53 was allowed to appeal in 2023. The inspector dealing with the appeal considered Walkinsgate to be reasonably well served in terms of facilities, and that the village is a sustainable settlement containing a wide range of facilities. He concluded that the substantial benefits secured by the proposals to help address the shortfall in housing land and the contribution to meeting affordable housing need, additional school places and highway safety improvements would outweigh any harm identified. The principle of residential development of this site and access is therefore established and cannot be revisited. Matters to be considered today relate only to layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. The proposed layout accords with the illustrative master plan submitted with the outline application. It is landscape-led and includes a large attractive area of public open space at the site entrance, which extends northwards to lead to a central area containing a children's play area. Cycle and potential impacts link all areas of open space throughout and around the edges of the site. The open space within the western part is arranged around the retained vegetable tree, which will sit behind the community orchard. 12 allotments are also proposed within the westernmost corner of the site. Details in relation to children's play, equipment, landscaping, the orchard and allotments have been submitted as satisfied condition 25 of the outline permission are still under consideration. The proposed dwellings are arranged within a hierarchy of streets to create a legible place to live with tree-lined streets and a variety of house types and sizes. Density decreases around the edges to provide an informal green edge. 25% affordable housing is proposed, amplified by a legal agreement attached to the outline, to deliver 31 social rented dwellings and 19 shared ownership dwellings within a mixture of 2 and 3 bedroom properties. The mix is supported by the council's housing strategy officer. The layout achieves policy compliant separation distances between dwellings and generally provides amenity areas that comply with standards set out in the space around dwellings SPG. There is no objection to the proposed from the Council Highways Authority. The scale of the proposals comply with the parameter plan attached to the outline consent. All dwellings are 2 stories. In terms of appearance, the officer's report supports the variety in character proposed in terms of housing typology, density and road hierarchy. Officers consider the design of dwellings and the palette of materials proposed would provide consistency through the site and provide sufficient articulation and focal points to create variety and interest in the street scene. Your planning officer concludes that the proposed layout of density and house type proposed reflects local character and is acceptable in terms of design. Conditions attached to the outline consent requires the submission of further details to ensure that there will be no additional risk of flooding. Details for the disposal of foul and surface water have been submitted and are awaiting decision. We note concerns raised by the parish councils and local residents and respond as follows. Solar panels will be installed on the most efficient roof slopes. The committee should be aware that these panels do not need direct sunlight to create energy, they work in all locations. Every plot will have an electric vehicle charging point. Swift bricks will be installed to every plot. Bellway Homes are more than happy to have a direct dialogue with local residents and we will provide contact details of the site manager in due course. In conclusion, the proposal will provide 200 dwellings, 25% of which will be affordable. The mix and tenure, both open market and affordable, comply with the requirements of the Section 106 legal agreement attached to the outline planning consent granted as appeal. There is no objection from any statutory consultee, and the council has received all relevant details required to satisfy the conditions attached to the outline consent. The applicant wholeheartedly supports the recommendation to approve the proposals for this site, which will provide a high quality living environment for its residents and assist the council in providing much needed housing within the district. Thank you for your time.
Can I just thank you that with just a gavel and you come to much it to do with us.
Excuse me, but members of the audience, please refrain from shouting that unless you've got an emergency. It makes it very difficult to pick up what's been said in the room. The acoustics aren't fantastic as it is, so please bear with us on this. Before going further, I think I just invite officers to they want to speak on what they've heard already.
Just like to come back in response to Mr. Chatburn's comments. The inspector had before him in determining the outline application and transport assessment. And that transport assessment included details of the junction improvements that were referred to. Those junction improvements were always proposed to be carried out by the developer and formed part of that transport assessment on that basis. So the inspector didn't allow the appeal on the basis of works that were going to be carried out for HS2. He did so on the basis of what was within the transport assessment. So there's no reference within the appeal decision to the scheme only being acceptable because of works proposed as part of HS2. Indeed, there is a condition attached which requires the junction improvements that were shown as part of the developer's submission within the transport assessment. They were required to be carried out prior to occupation of 50 dwellings. Mr. Chapman referred to the conditions and the fact that there's no reference to that condition in the report that is before you tonight. The reason for that is that on a reserved matters scheme, the outline consent and the conditions that form that outline consent form part of that permission. So you'll see in the recommendation that the first condition says link to the outline planning permission and conditions. So all of the conditions that the inspector saw fit to attach are all the requirements before this development can take place. Thank you.
Up to you, councillors. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise in advance for the plan officer. I've got a few queries, so I'll do a few and pass over to anyone else who's got any questions, if that's okay. So the first ones I just want to touch on are condition 6 and condition 7, which just reference the roundabout and the Puffin crossing. Now, I take on board what you were just saying, Rachel, about them being conditions already, but I was wondering at what point it's saying that those have been complete, like what that actually means. Will there be formal sign off by planning officers at those points, or will it be more informal than that? Do you want me to ask a few and then I'll go back and forth if you want.
I'll come back in at this point, easier. Thank you. So yes, conditions 6 and 7. They don't, I'm just checking the wording of them. So neither of those conditions require the submission and approval of details. They're both saying that something shall happen. So, for example, condition 7 requires the works for the Puffin crossing to be completed prior to occupation of any dwelling. So, yes, we would, to the best of our ability, look to monitor that and ensure that that is carried out in accordance with the requirements of that condition. So, but there isn't a requirement for a sign off because there's no requirement for any works to be, for any detail to be approved as such. And there isn't, within the planning system, there isn't a requirement for the conditions to be signed off unless they require approval of detail.
So, for example, on condition 6, I think the wording was, no greater than 50 dwellings hereby permitted shall be occupied until the access roundabout has been provided. And for example, I think condition 7 it said, Puffin crossing works shall be completed prior to occupation of any dwelling. I'm just wondering who was in charge in terms of making sure those things happen, making sure that the works are complete prior to occupation.
Well, we are as the local planning authority to the best of our ability. So we would, it's difficult because on a housing development like that, it's difficult to know exactly when houses are complete without going out there every day and checking, and clearly we don't have the resources to do that, but we would try to the best of our ability to ensure that that is carried out. And if it isn't, we normally get advised of that by a local resident or by the ward councillors, and at that point we're able to contact the developer and look to expedite that.
Is there anything that we can do in terms of, I mean, I don't even know if you can condition a condition, but that Bellway have to get formal sign off on those conditions?
No, we couldn't do that because the conditions are there set out in the outline consent, and have been that the wording that's set out there was what the inspector considered was appropriate. So we couldn't require that. We couldn't put any additional conditions on. All we can do, as I say, is do our best to monitor the situation and ensure to the best of our ability that it's done when it should be.
Okay, I'll leave that one just for now. The next one is a community liaison committee, as Mr. Walker said. I live on a relatively new build estate in Baldwinsgate already, and sat on the liaison group that they had at that time. And it was a great source of information for the community in terms of following up on things that weren't done. It worked really well. I did reach out to Bellway last week and had a conversation with a gentleman there who was really helpful and informative and was 100% on board in having a liaison group. I put to work to him the idea of doing a kind of meet the team type event in the ward. So the site manager, etc., could meet the local residents and try and set some expectations of what it's going to be like and who we can contact if we've got any queries. At Bellway, we're absolutely on board with that, which is great. Is there anything we can do in terms of the conditions, making sure they follow that up?
Yes, if members feel that that's necessary to make the development acceptable, we can attach such a condition. We wouldn't ordinarily for a development of this scale. Liaison committees tend to be for developments that are going to take place over a number of years, such as a quarry, for example. And so wouldn't necessarily be something that we would recommend for a housing scheme, which is why it's not recommended in the list of conditions. But absolutely, if members feel that that is something that they would like to see, then yes, it can be attached as a condition.
I'm happy to listen to other committee members, but yeah, for first hand, 100% think there was a benefit in having that liaison group and would be, so I'm putting that forward in time. The next question was just about bungalows. Obviously, there is quite a number of bungalows in Baldwinsgate. When we had the estate that I referenced, the latest one in Baldwinsgate, there was bungalows on that. Why are there no bungalows? I could be asking you a question that you can't answer, but why are there not bungalows on this development when they are already existing in Baldwinsgate and it would match them what's already the mix of type of dwellings there?
There's no policy requirement that there has to be bungalows. There's policy within the neighbourhood plan that requires a mix of development of dwelling types to provide accommodation for people with different accommodation needs. It doesn't specifically require that there's bungalows. The development didn't come forward with any bungalows, and at the outline stage, the design and access statement set out that it was going to be 2-storey dwellings, and the inspector didn't take issue with that, and in fact imposed a condition that required the reserve matter scheme to comply with the requirements set out within the design and access statement.
So, retrospectively, there's nothing we can do about including bungalows on that agreement.
No, because as I say, if the inspector felt that was necessary at the outline stage, it would have been a condition at that stage. And given that there's no policy requirement or policy basis to insist on that, there's nothing that we can do at this stage.
Okay, but my final kind of one for now, which was touched on by a speaker. There were some points raised or objections raised in terms of solar panels and electric points for charging vehicles. Obviously, Stephen mentioned that they are. It might have been I just missed them. I just want to make sure that those things are in the applications. That would be solar panels and electric charging points for every vehicle. Oh, sorry, electric charging points for one per dwelling, I think was what I read.
Yeah, there's a condition on the outline consent that requires every block to have electric vehicle charging points. So that has to happen because it's a requirement, a condition. And yeah, the solar panels, I don't believe that is a requirement in there. I don't think it's set out in the condition anywhere, but the developer is saying that solar panels will be installed on the most efficient roof slope.
I'll hold my questions for now and pass over to in case anyone else wants a bit of time. Thank you.
Councillors wishing to speak on this application? Councillor Holland?
Thank you, Chair. I think I can answer the question posed by bungalows. They make less money out of them. Obviously, developer are building two-story houses to make more profit. Unfortunately, that's not something we're empowered to take into account. Can I ask an officer a couple of questions? Starting with the first speaker, councillor. All of that, to my ears, sounded like access. And your response, our officer's response, sorry, to that first public speaker was to say, actually, the inspector decided this and the inspector had all the information available to him. So the inspector was aware that any road improvements related to HS2 won't be going ahead and that the only changes will be changes that are agreed as a result of this development or in connection with it. That being the case, we can't revisit any element of access. It's not reserved, it's already been decided, it's been taken out by hands. Is that correct?
Yeah, just to correct on one point that at the time of the public inquiry, the inspector wouldn't have been aware that HS2 wasn't going to be happening. But what I was saying that the proposed junction improvements were set out to him in the transport assessments and that they were always intended to be carried out by the developer. But yeah, moving on to the wider points, absolutely the access to the site is not before members now for consideration. It's already been approved. We are unable to revisit that now. It's not a case of we're saying we don't think we should or we don't want to. We are unable to do that because this is a reserved matters application that follows the granting of the outline, and it is only the reserved matters that's set out in the report. So the internal access arrangements, the layout, the scale, the appearance and the landscaping. It is only those matters that are before you tonight.
Okay, that's disappointing because, of course, Blackbrook is dangerous. This part of the A53, that junction is incredibly dangerous, and it is now, and it can only get worse if that road is used more by more slow moving traffic, and if extra housing developments get piled on, then we'll use that road. So it's a shame that there is no mechanism for us to say, to refer it back to the planning inspector and say, hang on, could you revisit this, please? Because I think that's what residents would ask us to do if we had full freedom of choice. It being the case that we can't do that, are we satisfied that we have done everything we can to draw to the attention of county highways, for example, because they're not our roads, and the counties, they manage the roads. And is there a mechanism for us to ask highways or the Safer Staffordshire Partnership to look again at speed limits and road regulation? I mean, all of this perhaps ought to be as part of this application, but again, because a developer agreed, we don't get to insist on that sort of thing. If I was a developer, I would do exactly the same. I would say, well, that's somebody else's problem. Highways, those are local authorities' problem, so long as I have got my planning consent and the access is considered safe in isolation. Is there anything that we can do? Did we brief Staffordshire County Highways, for example, appropriately when we consulted on this? They're a Staffordshire consultee, and I know that quite regularly Staffordshire County Highways don't. But we won't have asked them anything about this reserved matters application, will we? Because access is already being determined. So has anyone at Highways seen the proposed layout and have we any comments on it? Sorry.
Yeah, we have carried out a consultation with the highway authority because they're also looking at the parking provision and the internal layout. So they have seen the scheme, but I also am aware I've been copied into correspondence between the parish council and the county highway authority about the matters that have been raised tonight. And a response has been provided by the, I think it's the head of highway authority on those matters. So I do know that they are absolutely aware of the issues. Do you want me to say what the response was, or?
Just read into the record, and I think members of the public gallery would like to hear it as well.
Well, as I say, I was only copied into it, and so it wasn't a response to me. But I think the highway authority were really saying that these issues were considered at the outline application stage, and they're unable to revisit those matters now. But yeah, I haven't been privy to any conversations or any discussions about that.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I'm grateful to our office of the answers. I'm sorry for labouring the points, but I think it's useful in the context of a lot of people who are very interested in this application. I want to know that we don't necessarily like it. The authority here refused outline planning consent, and it has been imposed upon us by the planning inspectorate, and we are therefore having to make the best of what we can. Turning to the application itself then, which is about reserved matters, I recall we've had debates in this committee before about access to adopted highways. So there are 6 bin collection points covering more than 30 properties. Again, I would like very much every property on a development that's happening in virgin countryside in our green belt to be accessible from an adopted highway. And the reason, again, I don't wish to mention any particular developer, but generally, if I was a developer, I would include as many of these unadopted roads as possible because they're cheaper to construct and they're constructed to a less high standard and they become somebody else's problem. They don't become an issue for other people. They do for us because, of course, we've got to collect all of those bins. And is there any way we could push back and stretch some of those unadopted access roads? Have we adequately, again, in the future we have a stronger policy on this, but to the best of our ability, have we done that?
We did express concerns initially when we received a pre-application inquiry about the site, and the developer did address that partly and did increase or reduce the number of lines that would need to have a collection point, and they have in a couple of instances they've reduced the distance that the properties are from those bin collection points. So your officers on balance are satisfied that a total of 35 lines out of the 200 is reasonable.
Thank you, and I accept the answers that we've had. The last one from me then. A lot of the objections, I have tried to read as many of them as possible. I don't think I've quite read all of them, but I know that many of the people who wrote them will be in the public gallery tonight. A large quantity of them are, as our office has explained to us, Chair, related to matters that have already gone, so that the inspector has already decided we can't revisit. Some of them are private legal concerns. I know at least one resident's written to say, hang on, the drawings look as though this is encroaching on my land, and that unfortunately again is not part of the planning process. That's a private legal dispute between one person's boundary and another. But in terms of the layout of dwellings then, are we confident that the boundary treatment is as strong as we can expect? So we saw on the map, for example, it's not in front of us anymore, but the site plan, the layout plan, given the choice of building these dwellings on any portion of the land, you can see they're building some to the south and to the west, and then some banding properties on the northeast side. Was that boundary treatment agreed and outlined, or now that we're looking at that layout and they've chosen to put those houses where they are, have we applied scrutiny to how that is being done? How those houses relate to the houses on the other side of the boundary? Have we actually looked at that properly?
Yeah, those, the issues such as boundary treatments wouldn't be considered as part of the outline. It's something that we look at as part of the reserve matters process. So, yeah, we have considered the details that have been submitted, but there are some areas where there are perhaps issues that we need to raise or questions that we've got, and so there's a condition 4 on the recommendation requires approval of boundary treatment.
In that case, I open it up to other councillors if they have any particular wordings that they'd like to apply to condition 4, knowing what they do about the application.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Do the members wishing to speak probably Councillor Ryan back? Councillor Williams.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We are again. Nobody listens to the community. Nobody listens to this planning committee. We refused last 2 in Bowlesgate for planning applications and gone to appeal and appeal expected it was given to them. We argued over highways. A53 is a very, very busy road. Taking this development out, it's still a busy road. The industry and market trade, the Shropshire, coming through to Denton Road and then after linking onto the motorway. From the 2 next and the other junction, nothing's been done with those for years. A little bit of tinkering around. I'm sure the county councillors in that area are forward and complained and trying to get the county council highways to do something about doing nothing at all. I'll go back to this particular development. We've argued and argued and argued with highways, and it's just battle on decades. So it really concerns me with the traffic going through and the roundabouts and the junction of Manor Road. Right, Manor Road. As in no left turn going from Northern Bay into Manor Road. So that question. If there's a good that be one question. I want to come back.
I was just going to say we can't consider that now because that's already been.
Again, we're getting back to the original plan application that nobody listened, or they listened. Didn't want to take questions on board. So in the on the A53 now is the next Polygon crossing. And also, as been mentioned before, the boundary treatment. What's the boundary treatment on the front and around the roundabout? Is it an open aspect on the roundabout? Or will it be guarded by these big aluminium barriers that we see on the motorway? Thinking on the Kill Road and we're going to the Hampton side. Absolutely disgusting. I'm trying to get something from the people who live in that area with this planning application. You know, to say open aspect of that. And what will be the boundary treatment on the front. And also the question is, it's a pedestrian access. When we talk about that on through Manor Road, off this estate, or is it a close estate when you go on to the off the main A53?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Please.
Maybe just opening up the boundary treatment. So, there's points on the site here, which I think is where you were asking about, isn't it, adjacent to the roundabout. The orange, is a 1 metre high metal estate railings painted black.
The state railings, what the park railings, what you're saying.
Yeah.
Park
And
railings,
only a metre in height, because obviously otherwise there'd be concerns about them impeding visibility. Yeah. And then you asked about access through to Upman Road.
Yeah.
So I think it's Madeley Road, isn't it, at that point?
Is it Madeley Road?
Yeah. So there's a footpath shown at that point there.
No, what you're saying with the metal railings or what the existing.
Yeah, that orange is all the metal railings. That is the existing edge to be retained, I think. Yeah. But as I say, we've put a condition on requiring that we agree to the final details of the boundary treatments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor,
Thanks, Chair. Just 3 points, if it's okay. The first one, again, I'd like to echo the comments by Councillor Holland. 35 dwellings out of 200, that's 17.5%, and on an unadopted highway. To me, that's nothing more than developer agreed. Every household deserves to be able to put their bins out for collection on the curb next to their property. The unadopted highway will be an inferior quality than the adopted highway. So can I just ask the officer, if the road, the unadopted road that is, collapses or we get potholes after a very short period of time, who will repair the road? Will it be the residents, the developer, or will the Borough Council have to pick up the tab? Second point on page 16, we read the lead local flood authority raised no objections. However, condition 14 of the appeal notice remains to be discharged. I'm just wondering, is that anything that we need to be concerned about? And the third point is, in one of the representations, one of the residents has said the proposed tree species are unsuitable. I was just wondering, the trees that are to be planted, will they be approved by the Borough Council or Borough Cultural team, or can the resident just choose the cheapest tree available and pop it in? Thanks very much.
thank you, Councillor.
And the developer.
Right.
Sorry, Rachel, I meant the developer choose the cheapest tree, not the resident.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, in response to your first question, so if for those parts of the highways that are unadopted, if there is any anything that needs repairing, it wouldn't be the Borough Council who would do that. It would be the developer or the residents if it's being transferred to the residents. Second question about the drainage details. There's no particular issue there. It's just that they've submitted the details. We've consulted with the local flood authority on those details, obviously as the experts on that matter. They requested some additional details that have been provided, and we're just working towards having a scheme in place that they are satisfied with before we discharge that condition. And then your final question about the landscaping. There is a condition recommended, condition 13, landscaping scheme. So our landscape development section have looked at the very detailed landscaping plans that have been submitted as part of the application, which include all details of the various species, etc. And they are satisfied with that, and they've got no objection subject to a condition that the development is carried out in accordance with the submitted and approved landscaping plans.
Wish to go back, councillor?
No, that's fine, thanks, Chair.
Councillor Gore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Been a frustrating experience this evening. Heard a good deal from the questions. Really serious issues. It's frustrating that there is nothing but just hoping that at some stage the law changes and we will be in a position to perhaps have a more effective voice to say over these matters. But my question really isn't, because I accept that we've got to work with the system. But my question really is about the internal, which I guess is a reserve matter and therefore is something that we can discuss. See, okay, right. Now there's a sentence in the report that was circulated, this final paragraph of page 12, which sort of intrigued me because I've not come across this before. It's referring, I think, to the sort of hierarchy of internal layout, and the sentence is as follows. The eastern and on the western boundary of site, a more informal approach will be taken. I just wondered what an informal approach, what that actually meant in terms of a road network, a road layout. What is an informal one?
It just means less kind of straight lines, really. Just showing you. So yeah, it's referring to. I'm sorry, I'm not sharing. Apologies. So yeah, it's referring to this part of the site here, contrasting that with over here with kind of straighter lines. Well, that's what it's referring to, just kind of making it more informal. And so it's not about the actual spec of the roads themselves, it's the alignment.
And the opposite of the explanation.
Williams?
Thanks for letting me come back. Just a question really. Is there any guarantee that the Staff County Council will take on, adopt all the, or they'll adopt the roads? In my patch where we've got all the statey properties, they haven't been taken on by Staff County Council. Given no reasons why, but they're up to standard. But is there any guarantee? Because when you live in a private road, you have to pay for their maintenance. The maintenance company come in. They have to buy you life savings on the property. You pay local tax. But you have to pay private company to maintain the grass and the roads. So is it guaranteed that Staff County Council will adopt these roads on the state?
There is no guarantee now, and there is a separate authority to us, and we're not able to have any control over that process. I do know that on many estates, it's a process that goes on for many years and can sometimes be unresolved, but it's not something that the Borough Council has any control over at all, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question just for, it may be left field, I don't know, but, is there any way in consideration that we, obviously as a committee, we've got issues around, the arrangements around free and access arrangements. Is there any way we could actually, I'm not just want to say condition, but I'm not sure whether a condition will be appropriate, but we could ask Highways to review the situation. Because we've got these reservations about the scheme in terms of the traffic management side, but we could compel Highways to revisit, say after 12 months to see if the scheme is working or not.
No, I'm afraid there's no way that we do that. Certainly not, we couldn't compel them, and we couldn't require that by condition, because as I said before, that isn't before the authority for consideration. We could ask them, I mean, as a county councillor, you may be able to speak to them and ask them if they can consider it, but we wouldn't be able to do anything more than that.
So very good to say that. Thank you anyway for your indulgence. Councillor Harland.
Thank you. We're going to vote on this shortly, I'm sure. The issue that you just raised is more general than just this one application, albeit that we've heard evidence tonight that this application is going to have a severe impact on the A53, in particular that very dangerous junction. If it would help you, Chair, I know you're a county councillor, we're all borough councillors here, and we've got representatives and current members and former members of the parish council in the room as well. I feel very strongly that this would be a useful point at which a letter should go to the Highways Authority asking them to do additional work on the A53. And if having the force of a vote of this committee behind you would help you in doing that, Chair, I feel strongly that we should vote on it separate to the application. I understand our officers told us that it can't form part of our decision-making process. But I would like very much to lend my support to that, such that when you, as chair of this committee, write a letter supported by our officers who may be in the room, or perhaps officers who aren't in the room, sorry for creating more work for them, that comes as a serious, not a detailed piece of work, but a serious and solemn request from us as planning committee members to say to the county council, okay, do it now, start looking at highway safety in this area. I'm sure they are already, continue to do so, but do so in the context that there is additional house building happening nearby. And I'm sure that, borough councillors and county councillors and members of the public represented by the parish here tonight would be supportive in that being an ongoing process. As long as this development is happening, and afterwards, because we can't allow our roads to be dangerous in that way indefinitely. And yes, there will be a cost to the taxpayer, but we should look at that. I've spoken around that, Chair, but what I think I'm proposing is that in addition to voting on this application, we also vote to state that should happen, so that you can then write to Highways and tell them that we've done that tonight. Is that procedurally acceptable to you for us to have that vote?
Thank you for that, Councillor Harland, and yes, it is.
Thanks, Chair. Just one final question. We have 8,000 or 9,000 square metres of green space in this development. Will the green space be maintained by the developer, and will the households have to pay an annual fee to maintain the green space? And also, what about the children's play area? And will it be handed over to the Borough Council to be maintained? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Your question.
No, it wouldn't be the Borough Council that would maintain it. Would be a management company, which is the usual process now. So residents would contribute towards that on an annual basis, I believe.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Councillor Holland for his suggestion for the highways. Obviously, I attended there and asked the parish council and hear firsthand from Councillor Chapman and his wife about what they saw at that fateful incident. So I appreciate his input with that, and echo what everyone has said. I wish we could do more. It's one of the most frustrating things about being here and doing these types of things, that you want to do the best for your ward, we all do. And it's frustrating when things are out of our hands sometimes. So yeah, I appreciate your input with that, Councillor Holland. The only final point that hasn't been covered that I also wanted to make was in the report, Staffordshire Police Designing Out Crime Officer raised a few concerns. I wondered if we were going to address any of those.
The majority of the concerns that are raised relate to boundary treatment. And as I said before, we've got a condition recommended that requires details of treatments to be submitted to and approved. So we will be looking to address that as part of that process.
And the lighting, is that one that would be picked up there? I think that there was one, lighting within the development should create a safe place for pedestrians and vehicles. And it goes.
Well, yeah, we're not recommending a condition relating to lighting. The street lighting itself would come as part of the adoption process for the highway authority. They won't adopt the roads unless there's appropriate street lighting in place. So that would be covered there. Yeah, if you wanted a condition that requires approval of details of lighting, we could do that.
It does answer my question. I'll happily listen to anyone else on committee who think they've got whether that would be a good condition or not, if they think it'd be in value.
Okay, let's do the unpopular part then. I'll move the recommendations printed with the two additional conditions that we've discussed. So the first of those is the one that's just been mentioned, relating to prior approval of the internal lighting scheme. And we want to be certain as an authority that it meets the requirements set out by the planning inspector in granting the permission at appeal. And the second one's completely gone out of my head. What was that saying?
Liaison group.
Liaison committee. So informally, I think it's perhaps already been raised by a representative of the House Builder, but I think they're unlikely to appeal us on that. So they will, I think, be willing to do it. And it is always better to have better community engagement than not to have. So the second additional condition relates to the establishment of that committee along the usual lines for a committee of that nature. I appreciate that this is not the kind of development that normally attracts that, but the public are asking for it. We clearly think it would be a good idea. So with those two additional conditions, I'll move the recommendations. Do I have a second, Amy?
Unfortunately, so.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Thank you, Councillor Holland. You have a counter proposal. In which case, I'll take that formal one. We formally proposed that this is accepted, subject as written in the report, with the addition of two conditions, namely to do with the right lighting scheme and also to do with the formation of a liaison committee. Let's see a show of hands in support of this recommendation. In favour. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. The item's passed with the conditions.
Can I also then move, Chair, that we invite you, with the support of our officers, to write the letter that we discussed earlier relating to highways. It's a very serious matter.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Mr. Chairman, yeah. Put a vote on that, can we guarantee that the committee sees that reply?
Yes.
Public.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
It starts up and it's all so if you were not always being space, you can say you're going to have 5 years. But it's always there. You started like watching rights, and that's what I'm saying is based.
Shame. No, it's just really just like those who think you go over the I mean, it's becoming it's like I said. They all get money on site and they if they want 75 they put it out.
Because they're choosing it. There's no difference.
Just referring with me, that one, informed and advised by colleagues to the left. It says we don't need a formal vote on this, just that I will agree to write as taking on board your concerns and the wishes made tonight. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair.
Here, the next item of business is item 5 on your agenda, pages 23 to 40.
Yeah, this is
Application for major development, new farm or Takeley Road, Audley, Mandeview Care Home Limited.
fix this. Yeah.
Chair. All planning permission is sought for the erection of 39 dwellings, including recreation areas and associated works. The site lies outside of the Audley village envelope within the Greenbelt. This proposal is submitted as enabling development, which is development that would not be in compliance with local and/or national planning policies and not normally be given planning permission, except for the fact that it would secure the future conservation of a heritage asset. The applicant's own Madeley Manor, a Grade 2 listed building located in Madeley. Madeley Manor is falling into disrepair, and it is intended that an element of the profit from this proposal would cross-finance the works to Madeley Manor. So in terms of the Audley proposal, this is the application site here, edged in red. So just to the north is the junction with the A500 and Alsage Road here, which goes into Audley in this direction. So in terms of this proposal, given that the proposed development does not meet any of the exceptions set out in the NPPF for appropriate development in the Greenbelt, it must be concluded that the proposal represents inappropriate developments in the Greenbelt. In sustainability terms, although the site is outside the village envelope of Audley, in allowing an appeal for the adjacent development of 7 dwellings, which is shown here on the plan, immediately adjacent to the site, the inspector stated that while there's likely to be some dependence upon the private car, given the proximity of the site to Audley, future occupants would be able to make sustainable transport choices. This appeal decision must be afforded significant weight in the consideration of this application, and therefore it's concluded that the site is in a relatively sustainable location. Although the proposed landscaping would provide some screening of the development, and it is accepted that wider public views are limited,
it has to be acknowledged that the development of what is currently an open agricultural field would change the rural character of the immediate area. However, on balance and subject to conditions, it is considered that the impact on the character and appearance of the area would be acceptable. The Highway Authority raises no objections subject to the imposition of conditions. And given that both United Utilities and Staffs County Council as the lead local flood authority raise no objections, it is not considered that the proposed development would create any additional risk of flooding. Subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions, it is considered that the impact on ecology would be acceptable. Just before we move on, I'll just show you a few photos of the site. So this is the junction of Alsager Road with Cross Lane. This is looking along Alsager Road. This is from within the site, looking across towards Cross Lane here. And that is the access to New Farm. It's a current access, existing access, sorry, to Pool Farm. And that's looking along Cross Lane. That is the existing access, and that is the access that was approved as part of the existing developments of 7 dwellings. That's a view from Alsager Road. The site is the other side of that hedgerow. This is along Cross Lane with the site here to the east. Another view along further around on Cross Lane, just showing the high hedgerows to either side. So, notwithstanding the lack of objection from any technical consultees, inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the greenbelt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. Very special circumstances here is the enabling development case, which means that an element of the profit from the proposal would cross-finance the works to Madeley Manor. Planning permission and listed building consent were granted in 2023 to convert Madeley Manor to 14 dwellings, comprising 12 apartments and 2 mews houses. So the layout that you can see before you here is the is Madeley Manor, and this is the scheme that has planning permission. It's not financially viable to undertake the approved conversion works, and as such, the works would not be undertaken without funding from another source. The Historic England publication, Enabling Development and Heritage Assets, provides advice on enabling development. The document states that the case for enabling development rests on there being a conservation deficit, which is the amount by which the cost of repair of a heritage asset exceeds its market value on completion of repair or conversion, allowing for appropriate development costs. In this case, the applicants have submitted financial assessments which conclude that the conversion of Madeley Manor, in accordance with the approved scheme, would result in a loss of approximately £3.2 million. This figure is referred to as the conservation deficit and has been verified by an independent valuer. So, as stated previously, planning permission and listed building consents have been granted for conversion of Madeley Manor. Alternative schemes for that site were fully explored, and the proposal for conversion of the nursing home, along with the construction of 52 new apartments within the grounds of Madeley Manor, was withdrawn due to significant concerns from officers regarding the adverse impact of that proposal on the setting of the listed building. It's accepted that the proposed conversion scheme is the preferred option. The applicant has confirmed their agreement to enter into a Section 106 agreement, which would set out phasing for the housing development to ensure that the works to Madeley Manor are carried out in a timely manner. Just got some photos here just to show you Madeley Manor. So they agree to listed building. So you can see here the applicant's efforts to protect the building as far as possible. So that's at the rear of the manor. So the concept of enabling development is well established. It is a planning mechanism which permits departure from planning policies in appropriate cases, and so enables the conservation of a heritage asset in circumstances where otherwise the future of the asset would not be secured. The guidance on enabling development includes reference to case law, which determine that the land benefiting from enabling development need not be in close proximity to it. The guidance goes on to say that it may be preferable to site the enabling developments away from the heritage assets in order to avoid or minimise harm to it or its setting. As set out above, alternative schemes for Madeley Manor have been dismissed due to the harm to its setting. Paragraph 214 of the NPPF recognises that conflict with planning policies may be justified if the development proposed would secure the future conservation of the asset. The benefits outweigh the disbenefits of not adhering to those policies. In terms of disbenefits, the harm to the greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and loss of openness has to be given significant weight. Other disbenefits are the impacts on the rural character of the area and the fact that the development would not provide a mix of housing types. In addition, the development would fail to provide the required level of affordable housing or make the necessary contributions to health provision and public open space. However, heritage assets are an irreplaceable resource and great weight should be given to the future conservation of Madeley Manor. The Council has a duty under Section 66 of the Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act to pay special regard to the desirability of preserving listed buildings and their settings. It's considered, therefore, that the benefits of this enabling developments outweigh the disbenefits, and therefore the proposal is considered to accord with paragraph 214 of the NPPF. Overall, it is considered that the public benefit of securing the future of Madeley Manor comprises the very special circumstances to outweigh the harm to the greenbelt that would arise by reason of inappropriateness and loss of openness. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Now, I have a number of objectors to the scheme. It's four, in fact. Can I ask those that's taking part to avoid duplication if you can, in terms of I'm allocating you all 5 minutes if you really need it, but just so we're not all here at breakfast in the morning. It would be helpful if you didn't duplicate the previous speaker, if possible. So I'd like to invite, first of all, Councillor Rebecca Lewis, who is the ward councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Fellow members. Thank you for the opportunity to make this representation. I am here this evening to express serious concerns regarding the planning application for New Farm. Concerns that have been raised by local residents and which reflects ongoing issues with this applicant. This application is particularly troubling because the applicant already has planning permission granted for Madeley Manor under references 96000138/FUL and 96000137/LBC. Despite having these permissions in place, they've chosen not to proceed with those developments, instead submitting this inappropriate application as an enabling development. This raises serious questions about the applicant's intentions and their commitment to following through on previously approved plans. I question whether the original plans were requested with the aim of this development to be approved and the original not completed. It is also important to highlight that this is the third development by this applicant that has not provided any affordable housing, which negates their argument for using section 106 as a mitigating circumstance of this application. While section 106 agreements can be useful in offsetting development impacts, they should not be a substitute for providing affordable homes. The current proposal focuses on 5-bedroom houses which do not address the housing needs of our community. Historic England's guidance advises exploring other ways to generate funds before resorting to using an enabling development. While the applicant has shown that they have tried one option, they own significant lands that could be sold or repurposed to raise the necessary funds in manners like other stables or reusing it as farmland. Pursuing this application without fully exploring these alternatives is premature and unnecessary. Additionally, the applicant has not provided sufficient evidence to show that the 39 houses proposed are the minimum necessary for the enabling development to support their original development in Maidley Manor. There is also the issue that the original development itself may have been overpaid for at point of purchase, or even inadequately maintained throughout ownership, which adds further doubt to the justification for firstly an enabling development and the proposed permission requested. I do not think that the request that they have put through is reasonable to remove this land from the Greenbelt and have such a scale bill for this site. In conclusion, I urge the Planning Committee to carefully consider this application, the lack of affordable housing, the existence of previously granted permissions, and the unexplored alternatives to generate funds all raise significant concerns about the appropriateness of this development. Thank you.
Suggestions, Councillor Ian Wells, would you like to come forward? Councillor Wells. Begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Rebecca. You've probably said all the planning applications that I could use, so I will use your own historical links to Maidley Manor. As far as I can relate and know, there is no historical links between Orley and Maidley. The Lords of Orley certainly didn't have the Maidley Manor. There is no bus route and no connection with Maidley. This is just using a poorer ward to support a richer ward. There may be precedents, but only. Therefore, is that president using a poorer ward to support a richer ward, or a richer ward supporting a poorer ward? It is overdevelopment in a rural area. The parish council's own independent housing survey reckon there should be houses of 1 to 3 bedrooms. Certainly not 5. Again, no affordable housing being made recommended, and no 106 agreements coming to the village, which they will be using the assets if they use the village, doctors, dentists, schools. So we will be even poorer. Okay.
Objection, which is Parish Councillor Nick Hayes. Would you like to come forward, Councillor? Okay, give when you're ready by pressing the button in front of you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Planning Committee. I am the chairman of Orley Rural Parish Council. First of all, I want to just run over some of the facts for you, so you've got everybody on the public who behind me have got a grasp of what's going on here. And then I'd like to ask you to make some considerations, please. So first of all, this development in its original iteration was for less than a dozen houses, which are actually on brownfield site. The old new farm was piggery. So there is some grounds for building on that site, but just a few houses. That was contended by the parish council a couple of years ago, but because it's a brownfield site, the planning permission went ahead. I always ask members of the planning department whenever I meet to consider to build on brown belt before they ever build on green belt. Until all the brown belt's built on, that's the best way forward, because Audley rural parish is exactly that, a rural parish with a huge amount of green belt. So to go over the facts, when this 39 house development was brought forward, there was a huge amount of opposition to it. There's been almost 100 representations individually made by members of the parish. Indeed, the parish council objected twice to the planning application, and we made some suggestions that I want you to consider. First of all, we think it's an outrage that those responsible for the upkeep of Maidley Manor itself and let it get into such a state of disrepair. That's a fact. That somebody has abdicated their responsibility, and now it's been made a spectacle to require funding from somewhere else. As Councillor Wilkes has just said, nothing to do with Maidley, or it has nothing to do with Maidley, apart from the connection within the borough. Next, even if the houses were built, as Councillor Wilkes pointed out, there is no section 106 requirement for Audley parish, so there's nothing financially that we can gain to offset building the houses. It is a green belt. What you may not know is that Audley parish has produced a fully formed and completed neighbourhood plan that was submitted to the Borough Council back in the summer. I would urge you to consider if you say the houses have to be built, I'd urge you to consider looking at what the neighbourhood plan says. We've got a thorough housing needs assessment, and if the houses are to be built, which we don't want, nobody wants, probably people behind me, all the panels to that effect behind me, that you only allow properties to be built that are necessary to the parish, and none of those are 5-bedroom detached houses. So first of all, I'd urge you to consider that. Secondly, if Maidley Manor wants funds, let them build the houses on their estate, which the parish council recommended when we objected the first time to the planning application. So I'd urge you to consider those things, because once that green belt's gone, and as Councillor Lewis said, the developer here has got some track record in being probably duplicitous. I'd urge you to consider that this might be a bridgehead to building fully on the green belt that nobody wants. So thank you for listening to me. I urge you to make those considerations.
Councillor Nick Hayes, just to address the committee that they must disregard the comments made by Mr. Hayes regarding the character of the applicant. Thank you. Fourth objector is Mrs. T. Barrett. Would you like to come forward?
Don't mind, I'll stand.
It's fine, as long as you operate the microphone.
I hope everybody can hear me. I have timed this over and over to be 5 minutes, but that's really dependent on the remaining component. So first, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak against this planning application. I believe we are broadly united in our aims and have much in common. Indeed, the majority of us are here because we care deeply about our communities and are striving for their betterment, protection and survival. Many months have elapsed since the plans for this proposed enabling development were first lodged. Representations of objection number 85, an extremely high number, expressing serious misgivings relating but not confined to, flooding, road safety, leisure, ecology, local infrastructure, health and legal compliance. I do hope those deciding the outcome give due weight to the quantity and content of the objection. Of the multitude of harms and disbenefits to Audley, perhaps the most devastating will be the further injury to the home and business of the nearest neighbour at Paul's Farm, the esteemed Mrs. Mottram, whose entire life has been dedicated to providing first-class care and education to riders and horses. Say further injury because the applicant had already surreptitiously changed the status of the agricultural land adjacent to Mrs. Mottram in order to propose building 7 houses in place of the former livestock buildings. Despite the parish and borough council's emphatic rejection, an appeal in 2019 was successful and permission was granted. Stoic and philosophical, though bitterly disappointed, Mrs. Mottram then radically remodelled her business to obviate injury to horses and riders, potentially caused by the inevitable noisy disruption associated with the building of 7 large houses, which remain unbuilt to this day, chiefly because they were only ever intended to help unlock the door into the green belt. What followed was the heartbreakingly sad sale of many riding school ponies and the irreplaceable loss of a decades-old amenity which had attracted hundreds of people to Audley from miles around, giving children and those of modest means the opportunity to experience expertly taught horse riding and husbandry. Insult had been added to those injuries because the applicant, like many wily land bankers, made the permission extant by making a material start and then simply abandoned the project. 5 years of looking at a nefariously obtained building site has been Mrs. Mottram's reward for sacrificing her celebrated riding school. Her life's work decimated, along with its associated jobs, apprenticeships and opportunities for young people to attain nationally recognised qualifications. But remarkably, there remains an active and vibrant, growing collective of owners and riders, some of whose families have had a 3-generation affiliation with Mrs. Mottram and her enterprise. To grant permission for this spurious enabling development would be to complete the destruction of Mrs. Mottram's business. Scores of lifelong friends, some of them are here, would be torn apart and their way of life abruptly curtailed. Significant repercussions would also be felt by dozens of local providers of goods and services such as vets, farriers, saddlers, dentists, feed sellers, hay and straw merchants, and for what? Greed. Maximising profit on maybe land which had been deliberately and willfully neglected, as were the care home residents that were lied to and forced out, brutally evicted from the home they loved and hung out to dry. You can read the CQC reports. Why would anyone do such a thing? To provide a heritage asset upon which this entire enabling development hinges. Make no mistake, there will be absolutely no question of the 39 houses being approved as a standalone project. And so I turn to the planning officer's report, specifically the reason for recommendation, and I utterly refute the statement that the applicant has robustly demonstrated having met the criteria of enabling development. The exact reverse is true. In reality, the applicant's case is very weak, and this is robustly evidenced in the representation of G. Roberts. I can circulate that if you like. I found myself wondering whether our representatives and public bodies are blind to this subterfuge or complicit. I implore you not to reward this corporate greed, this cynical manipulation of planning protocols, and see this devious, shameless, mercenary, treacherous, underhand stamp of a scheme for what it is. Whilst you may not be able to reject this application on purely moral grounds, you certainly can and you should. You must reject it on the basis that the criteria for enabling development has not been met and it does not accord with historic England's dictate. Thank you.
On support of the scheme, Mr. Carl Pipstick, agent for the applicant. In when you're ready, Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. Planning policy allows enabling development whereby a proposal for form of development which would otherwise be unacceptable is granted planning permission because it would secure the future conservation of a heritage asset. So funds raised from a development cross-finance the restoration and use of a heritage asset delivered through a Section 106 agreement. In this case, the heritage asset is Madeley Manor, a Grade 2 listed Georgian manor house set within a parkland landscape, originally constructed by the Lord Crewe as a family home. The building's been in use since 2018, and despite ongoing repairs, it is in urgent need of a new viable beneficial use that will preserve it for future generations. Madeley Manor has been correctly identified by Historic England as a building with special architectural and historic interest, and preservation of the listed building and its setting should be given considerable weight when making planning decisions. Madeley Manor was put up for sale in 2020 with offers invited, and remains on the market today, but there's been little interest. Planning and listed building consent were granted to convert the building into a residential use for 14 units in 2023, which was considered by your officers as the optimum scheme, but that's not triggered a sale. The 2023 permission that was secured isn't viable, and it would make a loss of over £3 million, a sum which has been verified by an independent valuer instructed by the council. And this sum is known as the conservation deficit. The conservation deficit must be an exact amount, and it must be agreed with the council. The agreed amount of money must be the minimum, but at the same time, it must be capable of achieving its conservation objective in one hit. In this case, the Madeley Manor conservation deficit will be bridged by funds generated from delivering the proposal before you. This proposal ordinarily would not be recommended for approval because it lies in the green belt. However, green belt aside, the site comprises the species poor grassland paddock with poor draining soil. The site is located at the edge of Audley, which will be accessible on foot and is reasonably well related to shops and services. Executive level 2-storey dwellings are proposed, which includes 9 different house types arranged in a rural and organic manner with traditional materials and significant wildlife conservation measures and landscape buffer zones. Your officer concludes that the proposal would assimilate well within the wider area, and there are no technical objections to the proposal. In addition to securing the future of Madeley Manor as a heritage asset, the two schemes would deliver 54 much needed dwellings and would also have economic benefits. Once built and occupied, Experian data suggests that the households are estimated to generate additional spend of over £900,000 within Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough and £216,000 in Audley per annum. The construction of new homes will generate around £113,000 per annum in council tax revenue on current values. These economic benefits should be afforded weight when coming to a decision. In summary, the process of enabling development is a complex one, which requires a high level of close working between the council and an applicant, which in this case has been ongoing for the past 2 or so years. The planning application has had a rigorous appraisal from your officers and external consultants. On 2 occasions in the officer report, reference is made to this case for enabling development has been robustly demonstrated by the applicant, and enabling case equates to very special circumstances for allowing development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Before we go any further, would it be appropriate to ask the officer to respond to this, and while we've got our conversation and heritage asset officer here, if you'd like to cover and use it.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to say a few things. Obviously, Madeley Manor, it's been on listed building since 1966, one of the early ones. And it's important to understand that we do give this great weight, and there is a legal duty to give that great weight to ensure that the building is preserved into the future. And I also think it's important that I genuinely don't believe that there is deliberate neglect. I have been visiting this property for longer than these last few years. When it was in the ownership of the care home, we were threatening urgent works notices for the conservatory in particular because I wasn't informed that there was any other issues with the roof or anything like that. It was a care home in use. Every time I approached them in that manner to try and get the conservatory that's attached, you saw the scaffolds in there. It was a little bit of a fight, but they generally did what they needed to do. And we can go around the houses of what an urgent works notice is, but it's a temporary fix, essentially, to try and keep the building wind and weatherproof and free from vandalism. So that's the situation that we've tended to be with Maiden Manor at the moment. And that is, it's not just the fact that it's perhaps in some disrepair, it's the fact that it's vacant. And time is of the essence. Time is always really important when you're dealing with listed buildings. It's a complicated listed building. It's got complicated roofs. One of the leaks that we became aware of at the moment, so more recently, has been temporarily dealt with. There's a constant ongoing not so much vandalism issues, but constantly it's a fairly hidden site. So what happens is people, go and see if they can maybe get in, kids get in, and there was leg theft a while ago, but I had to be visiting. So we managed to stop that. There's a security system in there that alerts the owners. So I know that they are regularly monitoring the building. They're also fencing the building, which is really important when it's vacant, because as soon as it is vacant, it's so important to let the sunlight in, let the air circulate. So time becomes not an issue when you're dealing with a building that's vacant.
Thank you. That's cool. It's been said. Over to you, councillors. Councillor Chris? Councillor.
I'm sorry, I did have my life.
Sorry, I didn't see.
I'll see. Frank, hello. You got me? Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So it seems this story is that the developer bought the Madeley Manor and really wanted to do up the manor for the people of Madeley. So they would, I presume the local residents were heartbroken in its deterioration. And then they just couldn't quite afford it. And then so they scratched their heads a bit and remembered, we've got that filmed in Orgy, haven't we? Yeah. But then they thought, well, maybe when we did the sums, you got Section 106, we got to look at so much affordable housing, and there's not going to be much money left over to develop the manor. And then they go and dust down something like an old book from a shelf. They go, hang on a moment, I should dust it off, and it's enabling development. What's this? Wow, what an opportunity. It's broadly, we get a house development which isn't in tune with the local plan, no affordable housing, no Section 106 money to help with the village, and it's a balance. So you broadly are losing out on those aspects. And what are they getting in turn? There's not going to be a coach put on to take people to go and experience the Madeley Manor. It seems to me that this is going to be developed into a private residence that's not going to be open to the public. It's not like a Grade 2 listed building which is on a street and everyone can appreciate it, maybe a private residence, but no one will be able to see this. Its market value seems to be so low that no one wants to pay to do it up. What does it really add to anyone's lives? And another thing as well is it's normally, if you buy something and you can't afford to do it up, that's usually your fault, isn't it? There's a certain amount of risk involved when you make an investment, and if you make a bad investment, normally the thing is, well, that's your fault. It's called capitalism. And I wonder if there's a you say there's a case, there's a case history for this, for enabling development, but is there a similar case with something that is so far away that it's not going to benefit the people? I mean, it's not going to benefit people of Madeley because they won't be able to see it. So I'd like to see an example of something like this that's been done before somewhere in the country. I wonder what the other members think.
I just want to just stress that public benefit doesn't mean public access per se. So the fact of the matter is that as a heritage asset, the council, and we've talked already about that duty, we have to pay special regard to that, and we have to give great weight to it in order to see that this heritage asset doesn't fall into further disrepair. So it's not fundamentally about public access to the building. It's not about creating a visitor experience. And well, the kind of cross benefit. I understand the frustration with Ardley and Maybury, but it's kind of a bigger picture.
First reply. Thank you. So it seems that the people of Audley just have to pay for the Major Land's existence. So they will benefit from the knowledge that it exists. It seems all very strange to me. I mean, if the thing isn't worth going up, then really, why are we keeping it?
I don't know who said it's not worth doing up. It's a heritage asset. We've got quite a good scheme actually in place to ensure its preservation. It's got quite a nice interior. Those of you that have experienced it, maybe when it was a care home, and it's a great two-listed building, and the council has that responsibility. And it's not really about parochial issues in that respect.
But only the residents that own it, or the owners, are actually going to appreciate or know about it.
That's Chris. I can see where you're going with this. I think, and I don't think there's any value to be added to that point. That's the prerogative of people that own land and buildings, etc. That's not for us to decide tonight. I was going to say Councillor Gordon next, but I'll take Councillor Williams because it says indicated. But could you raise your hands next time? But I don't always see that lights because it's not very big.
It's a simple question, actually.
Like,
we've been asked to believe that this developer is actually going to pour all the profits into Madeley Manor, because I don't believe it for 1 minute. I don't believe that for 1 minute. Through the council for 31 years, Madeley Manor has been coming up for as long as I can remember for people to spend money, and it's a never had any money spent. So sorry, but this developer to me is, I just can't see how we can believe him. I'm sorry.
I think the planning commission would be subject to a section 106 legal agreement that would require those works to be done to Madeley Manor. So there would be triggers within that phasing within the section 106 that, for example, would say the first 10 dwellings could be constructed, and then the money from that would need to fund X within Madeley Manor, etc. So it would be carefully tied to the Madeley Manor development, so we wouldn't just give them planning permission and then let them go and build the 39 houses and leave Madeley Manor. It would be subject to this 106 agreement.
Can I come back on that, Chair? We all know 106 agreements. He never happened. And if he goes to an appeal and says, that won't be viable, we don't get the 106 agreements, and we all know that.
Yeah. I totally disagree with your point there. Section 106 is, we do have issues with developers coming forward and saying that the Section 106, or they can't afford the financial contributions, and where they robustly demonstrate that, we do accept that there isn't always the requirement for section 106, but this is a completely different issue. As I say, it's a legal agreement that would tie the two permissions together.
You go bankrupt.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Gould, thank you for your guidance.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the committee should be concerned. And I think obviously every effort should be made to conserve and protect it. I just wish the scheme in order was the best one, Chair. Really do. I mean, we're asked to support 39 dwellings, 5-bedroom, 2-storey. We've heard from local people and we've heard from councillors that that development doesn't align at all with local housing needs. Ordinarily, people could expect through the 106 agreement to have some compensation. I dare say there are many people, you know, in Orderly who would say you can't compensate us for losing greenbelt land. But ordinarily, the community could expect a recompense, but they're not going to get that. Although there's a reference in the report to close proximity, I don't think any of us would argue that Orderly and Bailey are in close proximity. Sorry, Chair, I think that really is stretching the point. The other thing that we're asked to accept is that the conservative building, somehow that building then becomes a public building, and then there's the public to enjoy it. But we've already established that is not going to be the case. So we can't even say to residents, your sacrifice, giving up this land, accepting this development, means that we have saved a building which is open to the public can enjoy. It's going to remain in private ownership, Jim, even if this particular arrangement goes through. So at the moment, Chairman, I'm not persuaded that there is a case to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. Can I offer my sympathy to our conservation officer, who I know has a job to do and does it very well. She's been invited tonight, I think quite unfairly by Councillor Crisp, to defend the philosophy of heritage conservation, I think. So I'm more inclined to agree with Councillor Gorton that conservation is important in and of itself. I'm extremely reluctant to approve this application because I don't like inappropriate development in the green belt, which definitionally this is inappropriate development in the green belt. I do like having to decide applications based on very special circumstances because it gives us a genuine choice, I think, in a way that our planning law doesn't often. Can I probe a little deeper into the connection? I know that it's been hashed out by other members. But at the very beginning of the debate, we were reminded by officers that there is case precedent that enabling development does not have to be adjacent to or near the conservation that it is enabling. However, we're being told that as part of this application, we're going to have to sacrifice, as we have done in the past on a number of cases, we've been invited to say we're not going to get the Section 106 money contributions that are required by our statutory consultees in order to make the development acceptable. Again, that is the definition of money and contributions that you can expect under Section 106. They have to be to make the application acceptable. So we're being told to approve something that in principle, in accordance with our policy and the law, is inappropriate. We're being asked to approve something without the necessary mitigations because that money is going somewhere else. It doesn't matter how far that money is flying away or how worthy the cause to which it is being applied is. And I agree that the conservation of listed buildings is a worthy cause. Can I ask, in order for us to determine that the application will be unviable with those S106 agreements, what figure has been placed on the profitability of the application? So the numbers must have been run, right? We've been told that the conservation deficit is 3.2 million. and we're being told that the profit from this site is necessary to go there. Is the number 3.2 million exactly? Is it more than? Is it less than that? How much money is the developer expecting to make in profit that they are telling us and the people we represent we can't afford to have what would normally be expected in terms of S106 agreement?
The financial assessment does show a profit of 16%, and that is on the low side. In viability appraisals, for example, it would normally be concluded that the developer should receive around 20% for it to be a reasonable profit. So in this case, it's 16% over and above everything else.
What is that in numbers? I understand it's a percentage, but we got the first figure, 3.2 million deficit, as a cash value. And again, we do not cast aspersions on the character of applicants because it's not within our rights to do that. Most developers they all look like the Monopoly man. They're running around with big bags of money coming at them. That is what they're concerned about. But there is still, even assuming that the developer or the applicant is an angel, and of course, the Monopoly man he's a capitalist, he contributes to our society in many ways, he finances things. Even if this developer is pure, let's assume the case, there is still a risk that the Madeley Manor won't get its conservation because any number of things could go wrong. They could dig, and at the moment a spade hits the soil, they discover something that they didn't previously know about land. Because we're only securing our agreement against the profits, we're only going to get that money for conservation once this development has been delivered and as those profits have been realised. That's just how money works. I understand that. But I want to understand whether or not we're approving something because there is an extensive planning history both at this site and on the conservation site. I completely agree with Councillor Mrs Williams. I do remember hearing of Madeley Manor before. Is it possible? I'm talking because our office is still consulting notes. Are we going to get a number or are we not?
Rachel's looking for the number. I don't know whether the applicant knows it off the top of his head, but generally the way enabling development works is that it's calculated in this way to be the minimum necessary. And there are some case law of where things like affordable housing and the like have been added into the mix. But then what that then means is that the number of houses or the development, whatever the development is, will go up. So this is why it's kept at the minimum necessary with these other items left off. So it is possible to add them in, and there are cases that show that.
I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to provide a figure, just to say that as I said, that a reasonable profit is deemed to be 20%, and this is 16%.
What's 20%? I accept the answer.
What figures?
No.
I'm happy for any member of the audience to pass me something if they have a number they want to look at, but of course I can't take the advantage of. Okay, I apologise, Chair, for encouraging the audience to participate. Okay, let's go back to principles. We have a number. In principle, this has been looked at, and we've been told we have to choose between a normal section 106.
Sounds odd. I just interrupt you, Mr. Bloke, just a second there. Maybe the agent for the applicant would be able to answer the question.
It's maybe an unfair question to ask him there.
I don't have the 500 report to hand, so it's on the platform.
Thank you.
Okay, nobody has 504. Let's take it in a different direction. In principle, we've been told we can either have the contributions, and they're in our report. I've got the report open in front of me at the moment, but as usual, there is a request from our consultees to have S106 contributions to make development acceptable. We've been told that either we can fund those things or we can enable the heritage conservation. And I don't think as a committee we should have to choose between both. I don't think we should have to say, okay, we can either have what the general public need and expect to make it an acceptable development, or we can have the badly needed heritage conservation at Madeley Manor. I am minded at this point of debate to refuse the application. As I said, it's unacceptable in green belt. Very special circumstances have to apply, and the one that we've been offered is this heritage conservation thing. I'm not sure that I am comfortable with that based on what I've heard. I don't want to take us away from the application site, but I do remember we looked at the Madeley Manor before. Can our officer say, in her earlier comments, our planning officer, not our conservation officer, mentioned that a consideration at some point in the past has been made of additional construction adjacent to the Madeley Manor site of a large number of apartments in order to fund the heritage conservation. Was that an officer decision? Was it a decision of this committee, or was it merely advice given by our officers to an applicant in advance of that? Because I think I speak for a number of councillors here when I say, actually, we were told, you know, to weigh all of the balances, we'd be more minded to approve a bit more, you know, developments at Madeley Manor that conserves the building than we would be to say, okay, there's going to be absolutely nothing on it. It's going to be pristine, it's grade 2 listed status, it's going to be secure, and the setting of it's going to be perfect. But we're going to dump a bunch of houses elsewhere in the green belt.
Sorry, I don't know if it's fine if someone's come back.
The application was withdrawn, so it didn't come before the committee. It was withdrawn on the basis of your officer's professional advice that given that we have a duty to preserve listed buildings and their setting, we had significant concerns that the scheme would have significant harm to the setting of that listed building.
You Councillor Bryan, Councillor Holland, Councillor Bryan, Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Chair. Just a two-part question. Councillor Chris mentioned at the start about how similar a case was that could be compared, where the property is in one ward and the house is being proposed in another. I wonder how similar there is a case to that. My other question was off the back of Councillor Holland's question about what happens if they develop all these houses and then have no funds to do the heritage assets. Is that what could potentially happen?
I don't have the details of the distance between the case law that I was referring to between the two sites there. But the guidance, and this is the guidance that we've referred to by Historic England, says that it cites this case law which determined that the land benefiting from enabling development need not be in close proximity to it. And the guidance goes on, in fact, to say that it may be preferable to site the enabling development away from the heritage asset in order to avoid or minimise harm to it or its setting. But I don't have details of whether that was 5 miles or 1 mile or 20 miles, I'm afraid.
You mentioned sure we have to be the same community though. Like,
No, it's not wrong. It's not. They're nationally important buildings. They're not parish. You know, they don't relate to the parish. They're nationally important. That's their designation.
And in response to your other question about if they were to develop the houses and then not be able to afford to do the works, the repair works to the listed building, that was my response previously to Councillor Williams, was that the Grantham Planning Commission would be subject to Section 106, and that would ensure that they can't build all of the dwellings. They would need to build a small number of them to fund the initial works to the listed building, for example, and then when the building had been made watertight, I haven't got the specific details, but it would be done in that way to ensure that the scenario you referred to doesn't happen.
You can take to that response. That's fine.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's come back.
Councillor Williams and then Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just information, on 2 occasions this committee has allowed money to be spent or development to go ahead if it's maintained and edited site. On a Stapleford garden, quite a lot of wall around the ground, old garden. Got permission to build there to keep the wall. The other one was in Rhinell, Hunting Lodge. It was allowed development side of the Hunting Lodge to money from that to go into the Hunting Lodge. That's very perfect. On 2 occasions, they've been next door to one another. Spiritual. I want to Amazing Man, it's a lovely setting. There's probably right away around it, as I know it's beauties and different points around that building. The majority of the old estate has been already been built on. The training college and any that was demolished and the housing estate was on. So trying to weigh up between money, and I think we should keep our assets of maybe 2 listed buildings and 1 listed building, but set that against what can go on in Oldley where the lots of that land. Between the two, well, I'm trying to get my hand down. Between the two, where we can build on green belts, building 3, 4 bedroom houses. Really not going to add to the housing list for the general, the rentable, affordable rented properties. In infringe on the business next door, and also anybody knows that junction. It's really, really dangerous off State Road. Very, very tight. And then the distance from Cross Lane to Audley, Castor Buzz is quite. Next. What's the something wrong there?
There's no books.
Yeah, I didn't say what I said from this state to Audley, Old Town Hall. And there's no bus service, to be quite honest, in Ushard. And we've got to go to Audley, Castor Buzz, and even that's been bus service has been cut to Newcastle. So really, there's limited bus service. So yeah, I can't, sorry, I can't weigh the two up, and I think I can't refuse this plan application on those grounds. The weight of that against green belts, houses really that won't add to the housing problem against listed building being repaired. So I've got to go with against the permission.
Say Councillor Chris, and I'll take one more question, and then we think what to think about in this vote or resolution. Councillor Chris.
Thank you. From what I'm hearing there, it seems like what you're saying is there has been an enabling development somewhere in the United Kingdom where the 2 projects are a distance apart, but we've got no idea what that might look like. We just know it happened sometime in the past. So there is a possibility for that we could grant this, and it would be, on reflection, when you look at when this has happened in other areas, a bizarre decision because of the distance, because of the unconnected nature of the 2 projects. I don't know. Secondly, it seemed that the choice, perhaps, if you wanted to save the Made Manor, would be, well, you could build something on the grounds that would be in character with the manor as it is. It would be a modern construction. Would that not be preferable to the proposal in Audley? It would seem reasonable.
The report does acknowledge that enabling development is the last resort. So your officers haven't just accepted this and thought, "Oh, yeah, that's fine, that's a good idea. We've considered it in a very robust manner. We believe that we've considered all of the alternatives. We've worked closely with the developer on that and their agents to look at whether there are any appropriate, suitable alternatives. And for the reasons that are set out at length in the report, it's concluded that there aren't any alternatives. And the concept of enabling development is well established. And the reference to this case law, it's not a case of us saying, oh, there's a case somewhere else in the country that is fine. The case law that's referenced is in the Historic England guidance. So the Historic England have produced a guidance document that sets out all of the things that need to be considered to justify enabling development. And within that, it refers to this case law which determined that land benefiting from enabling development need not be in close proximity. So it's not relevant whether it's within 5 miles or 20 miles or even 100 miles. It is still set out as acceptable within that Historic England guidance. And as we've said, it doesn't matter whether it's within the same ward or the same borough even. It's preserving a listed building, and the council has a duty under the Act to preserve listed buildings.
Cool. Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if I could bring the committee back to the opposite report, the proposal that is before us regarding the board leader. And I wonder if the planning officer could respond to the comment of the independent design review, which considered that the proposal represented overdevelopment. Now, that would seem to me to be a fairly substantial criticism from a group that should know that the proposal before us is actually an overdevelopment of a contained site. I'd be very interested in the officer's response to that.
The design review panel are just that. They are looking solely at the design of the scheme. They're not looking at it in the round, which is what we as the planning authority are having to do. So they had concerns that the development in their view was overdevelopment, but a smaller scheme wouldn't fund the development, and therefore it wouldn't constitute enabling development. So there wouldn't be the very special circumstances there. So yes, I see your point that they're saying it's overdevelopment, but there's a reason why that level of development is proposed. It's because that is the minimum that is required to fund those works to the building.
Thank the officer for her explanation, Chair. Seems as if we're being asked to set aside an awful lot this evening.
Councillor Gordon, very quick one, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not that concerned with some remarks made by members of this committee that if we refuse this, we can allow developments immediately manner. That's not the case. We refuse this, we refuse it on the grounds that's stated and not leaning towards extra developments on Maiden Manor. That's a separate issue altogether. Each application on its own, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not going to vote against this just to get developments on Maiden Manor. Thank you.
Councillor Holland.
It's a forward proposal if you'd like me to.
I would like you to.
Thank you. Okay. Great sympathy to our officer who knows what's coming. I'm moving refusal. We need to work on some grounds for that. Reflecting on what has just been said by Councillor Rawson, and he referred to the independent design review panel saying that proposals represent overdevelopment. Our officer's response to that is that because it's enabling development, overdevelopment up to the point at which it enables the conservation of our heritage asset is necessary. I'd like to look at that in context. Now, when the design panel reviewed it, part of the report that's in front of us says that the reason this is important is that there are not, I'm quoting from the report page, or page not on these, I'm quoting from that section of the report. This means there are not enough opportunities for open green spaces within the site, internal linkages and variety in built form. Now, that, in my mind, is directly related to the landscape development section requirement for S106 money, which again, I've lost my place document, so if I search again, contribution will come up. So I've now got the figures in front of me relating to S106 contributions. The landscape development section is requesting money for open space off-site, right? This is to offset the fact that there's not enough open space on the site. And the reason there's not enough open space on the site is because the site has to be overdeveloped in order to enable maybe manor conservation. I'd like to move that we refuse this application because it's unacceptable on that basis. So we can't get our £217,581 that is required, that is necessary to make this development acceptable. And we can't get £34,966 that the ICB has requested that's health related. Now, health and access to open space are important things to our community. And I don't think we should be allowing this development to go ahead if we can't get those things. Now, our officer said earlier on, in other cases, it has been possible for us to add it on. And if we could secure an S106 agreement that gets us 3.2 million for Madeley Manor and the £217,000 we need for off-site open space and the £34,966 for the health requirement locally, I might be prepared to entertain this. The NPPF's bias in favour of sustainable development doesn't apply to this. This is in green belt. This is very special circumstances. We're being asked to decide tonight whether the benefits outweigh the harms. I'm arguing that on the basis of what I've just said, the harms outweigh the benefits and we should refuse. Is that an acceptable formulation for us to refuse it? If so, I would like to move that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
So, paragraph 214 of the NPPF recognises that conflict with planning policies may be justified if the development would secure the future conservation of the asset and the wider benefits outweigh the disbenefits of not adhering to those policies. So what we would be saying is that the disbenefits outweigh benefits, and therefore it contradicts paragraph 214 of the NPPF. And then the other issue would then be to set out that it's not considered that the very special circumstances exist to outweigh the harms of greenbelt. So my view would be that there'd probably be two reasons for refusal, or kind of two-pronged, one reason for refusal.
Councillor Holland, are you satisfied with that?
I am satisfied, sorry, got too many microphones.
Sorry.
I am satisfied with that. It steers clear from some of the other things I know we've discussed, and it is unusual for us to be considering heritage conservation as part of this. The enabling development thing is unusual for us to be considering. But I think what our officers given as sort of codification of what I've said is correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just, I'm considering, if we say that, the development and the property, so we actually accepting that development on the green belt. I said the second point is made by the opposite. One outweighs the other. Now go along with that. I'm just going to say, I'd like to be wrong. If we actually talk about the site, what the site is, so whatever, or we then say, if the developer comes back saying, yeah, I'll do exactly what you want. So we can do the spot. It's that simple. So it's the second point you made that I felt more weight than actually talking about the development. Which it,
So
understand what I'm saying?
you're saying then that if we say, so along the lines of what Councillor Holland was saying, then that if they paid the section 106 contributions, for example, you're concerned that that would mean that we would be accepting the development?
Yeah.
But that would have to come in as a different scheme, as a new scheme, and we would be able to consider what was before us then. But in relation to this scheme now, we can say that the discount benefits, which include the lack of section 106 contributions, affordable housing, and the fact that it's in the approved developments in the green belt, we would be saying that they outweigh the benefits. And then we would be also saying that therefore the very special circumstances to outweigh the harm to the green belt don't exist.
Thanks. Ms. Chairman.
Thank you, councillor. Okay, members, we have a second of the council halls. Councillor John. Provided formally, does anyone have a council proposal before I move on? Okay. Divided formally proposed by Councillor Holland. Seconded by Councillor Buckman. Can we see a show of hands in support of that, please? And that's unanimous. Councillors, sorry. The members of the public wish to stay for the rest of the meeting, or do they wish to exit now?
Absolutely.
I think they will.
Brings us to item 6 on the agenda, the money around, Passport structure scale. You will have seen in your information pack, the reports, officers. Protect the environment. Protect the environment. Are we content to receive the report as written? Or are we content to keep this on the agenda?
Moved it.
Do that item moved. Yeah, it's item 7 on the agenda. Disclosure of exempt information. Brings us that we exclude the public. Please, the following item